approval come in and you see it says FHA, almost all real estate agents cringe, and it's based on a misunderstanding of what the minimum property standards are for an FHA loan. Years ago, FHA had very burdensome standards to actually have a property pass an inspection. And that's created this legacy bias in the real estate community to where there's a phrase, I don't think it'll go FHA, but upon further discovery, what I find out is it's just a guess because people don't really know what is required and what's not required. One thing off the bat, and then I'm going to show you a checklist. I'm going to go down it, and then I'm going to email it to you as well so that you have this and you have a guide for whether a property will go FHA. But let me say two things. First, there's an anti-flip rule that's not on the list. Once title changes hands, it has to be 90 days owned by the seller has to own it 90 days before it's eligible for an FHA loan. So if it's usually a flip. Between 90 and 180 days, the lender is required to get the settlement statement from the original buyer, the seller, and if they're selling it for more than double what they paid, the lender has to order at their expense a second appraisal. But that's the big one. The second thing is almost all the issues I'm going to go over with you, I can tell you right now, we have a repair escrow that will solve for them, meaning no issues with FHA. And lastly, FHA, the appraisal review process is way easier than a conventional loan. So let me show you this. So here's a checklist. Okay, so HUD's accepted model building codes, including 250 reference standards and local building codes in lieu of separate standards. That's a big deal. They don't have separate standards. They've basically accepted building codes, but they've identified certain things that as deficiencies: livability, health and safety, soundness, and structural integrity. Structural integrity would be like the roof and the foundation, and frankly, that's true of any loan type. It doesn't matter. Like conventional doesn't solve that. Livability is things like air, source. You have to be able to heat, cool, cook. Water has to be working. And basically it has to be habitable. And health and safety is basic stuff. No broken windows, no exposed wires, etc. So this checklist is in their handbook, and let's go down some of the basic common things. So first, missing handrails is a big thing. I had one this week where it's usually a front stoop. If you see an older home with a front stoop without it has a missing handrail, if you're a seller, you should just replace the handrail or make an allowance to the buyer or to add a handrail. They're not hard to add, and that opens you up as a listing agent to all buyers, not just conventional. Okay, so that's an easy fix. Chip lead paint, when you're doing your staging of the home, chip lead paint is going to be an issue. So if you see chip paint, just get the paint corrected. The asbestos is a hazardous material. If it's found, that usually doesn't pop up in any kind of normal appraisal inspection, but it's something to be aware of. Home systems and appliances. They just make sure they're functional. It's that simple. They take a look at the basement and crawl space. They make sure it's well ventilated. No evidence of termites or damage. And like we had one this week where there was like wires exposed. So we're getting those fixed. The bathroom. Making sure that the sink and the toilet work. Is everything functional? It's like basic stuff, guys. And then as far as the access, there's some access issues. The roof, this right here, the 2 years of life left, no one's ever going to, that never pops up because no one can tell what that is. But they do look for loose and missing shingles. That's a big one. Foundation, here's another one. On the foundation, that only becomes an issue if the appraiser calls out for a structural engineer or checks that it's settled box. Usually it's just if it's a structural engineer is requested by the appraisal, that inspection. Otherwise, it's okay, whatever's on the appraisal, to go forward with an FHA loan. And this is one that, this is true of every loan. Conventional has the same structural thing. So does VA, so does USDA, so do what calls portfolio products. No one does a loan with a house with a known foundation problem. Power lines is sort of an obscure one that pops up that just to be aware of. So if you're ever looking at a house for a buyer or you have a listing, the power lines need to typically be within about 100 feet of the property. and definitely not passing over it. So if you ever see like an older home where where the power lines are passed right over the property, that for sure is not going to go FHA, and that would be like a legitimate thing to just put conventional only on. But this is sort of a cool thing. Look at all these exclusions: normal wear and tear, minor defects, cosmetics conditions, aesthetic imperfections, worn, soil, or discolored flooring. These right here, guys, that list is usually what most agents think exclude a house from FHA financing. And in fact, that's not even true. So you're leaving money on the table, you're leaving potential buyers on the table, and knowing this will empower you to also speak to a listing agent. I get deals done all the time in which the listing agent says, it won't go FHA. It won't go FHA. I call, find out what it is, and if there's one of the things that for sure excludes it, we say, thank you, you're right. Usually it's one of these things right here. Usually it's one of these right here, and I just explain all of these are exclusions. And then if it's any of the other items, we have a repair escrow at Service First where you can still fund on time and the repairs could be made right after. It's up to $5,000 that the seller can put into a seller-funded repair fund. It could even be buyer-funded to save the deal if we need to do that. And we can still close in time. So that's a huge takeaway. So there you guys go. So you use this to your advantage. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a great day.